Well, that was a movie.
Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, this is Justin, and we just saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was, of course, written and directed by James Gunn, starring Chris Pratt, Vin Diesel, Bradley Cooper, a bunch of people. Zoe Saldana, Karen Gillan, what is Drax's real name?
Batista.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the trailer, somehow have missed everything to do with Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a group of superheroes that do things.
They guard the galaxy.
Know by now what they are and what they do. Coming into this was the first Guardians movie James Gunn had made since making the Suicide Squad, so I was kind of curious to see if the style would be switched at all. And honestly, I felt it did. Do you feel like it had hints, not strong Suicide Squad in there, but there were like hints of differences in there? Did you feel that or no?
I can see a little bit, yeah.
It was a lot more violent than previous Guardians movies.
Yeah, definitely. A lot more upfront about how violent they were going to be.
Right.
Too.
And not to say it's nowhere close to the Suicide Squad.
No,
it's not
PG-13 or whatever.
Yeah, it's very much a PG-13 movie. Not even like Doctor Strange level. Like people's heads aren't blowing up and bleeding out their nose type stuff. That's not happening.
Real people's heads.
Yeah, but it's very much like the category falls under like cartoon violence, where it's like they're bleeding green and yellow, so it's fine. You know, it's not violence when they're
not humans.
Yeah,
so we don't connect with.
But even still, there was a couple of like 2 shots in the whole movie where I was like, okay, that is above the usual Marvel grade of what they allow. Just twice, but it was still something where it's like, I think at this point Disney is just kind of letting James Gunn do whatever he wants, and I enjoyed it for that. I did.
I mean, it's James Gunn. You might as well just let him do what he wants.
You might as well. For me, honestly, this might have been my favorite Guardians movie.
I really need to rewatch them. I still feel like I have one, but maybe that's just a little bit of nostalgia.
Nostalgia. It's also it's for sure preference too, because it depends on what you're going to a Guardians movie for. Because the first one is definitely still, I think, probably the funniest one.
Yeah.
This one isn't trying to be as funny though.
No.
There's still a lot of jokes in it. It's a Marvel movie, but there's a lot less jokes and there's a lot more focus on story elements. You can even kind of pick up on that in the trailer. There's a lot of dramatic moments, powerful dramatic moments, and most of them land really well, and I enjoyed the plot.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 3rd movie, and for most people in Marvel, that spells the end of your franchise right there. So, you know,
if it doesn't, maybe it should. Thor.
What are you talking about? You're not ready for the next Thor trilogy?
Oh, God. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, I said it walking in the theater. Every Marvel movie anymore is marketed as the best MCU movie since Endgame. I'm not entirely ready to say that because, I mean, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But this is probably the next best since then.
It's going to be hard to beat Spider-Man with the multiple Spider-Man in that one.
Right. And that's, to be fair, this is probably a better movie than that Spider-Man movie, because that Spider-Man movie is crap, but it is so enjoyable.
You can't win over the fan service, all right? It's got more than enough to beat everything else. So
yeah, but at least the fan service in this movie wasn't followed by 30 seconds of silence for you to react every time. Because there are, I'm not going to spoil it yet, I'll talk about it later, but there are cameos in here that they're just, there they are and there they go. And I mean, it's reminiscent a lot of, Sam Raimi's Doctor Strange, where it's like, you can tell a director, a filmmaker made this movie. It wasn't just the MCU going, Puh. It was like, oh, a filmmaker made this movie to its benefit and to its detriment. Same thing with Sam Raimi, and you may hate or love Doctor Strange. I did like it, but both kind of had moments of, oh, that was a really cool moment, and also both kind of felt like collections of cool moments rather than completed stories at times. This a lot less than Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange definitely was a hodgepodge, but this had a lot of cool moments. I didn't check how long it was. Did it feel long to you? It felt long to me.
I mean, we've been seeing short movies recently, at least the ones I've been seeing with you, so this definitely felt longer than those, but I mean, I don't think it was
2.5 hours.
It was 2.5? I didn't think it was that.
It felt a little long. I wouldn't say that it felt longer than 2.5 though. It definitely did. I remember there being a moment where I thought the movie may be ending, and then it kept going, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, let's keep going. But yeah, it's not a major complaint. It did feel a little. It felt like 2.5 hours to me, at least.
Okay.
What can we say without spoiling anything?
Yeah, that's always the hard part.
Because basically, yeah, I mean, it's less funny, but that's not a bad thing. Like, at least to me, I wasn't like disappointed by the lack of jokes.
I expected a little bit more funnier, but I get what they're going for. You know, you never know if this is the end of the franchise or not. So you gotta start closing out some storylines potentially.
And I mean, it's marketed that way too.
Yeah,
like,
and it had already been announced that Batista's not reprising his role. If this was to go forward, he wants to act in quote unquote more serious roles.
Right, he wants to be a real actor. And
I'm interested in that.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm fine with that too. And I didn't mind the lack of jokes. It definitely, and I don't want to say lack of jokes like it wasn't a comedy. It still is very much a comedy.
Just compared to the other Guardians.
Right, yeah, like there's still, like they make a joke out of every situation possible still.
Yeah.
Nathan Fillion has a role in this movie, and his entire role is comedy. Like, he's not taken seriously whatsoever. May have been the funniest thing about the movie. I enjoyed him. Like you said, it's just not the same. It's not the same as the previous two, especially the first one. I mean, like, the first two each started out with, like, a dance sequence. This one started out with violence, you know, people almost dying. And you're like, this is a different vibe. We're getting off to a different vibe here.
A little bit. And don't worry, we had our dance sequence eventually.
Yeah, we got there. We got there. It may be based on preference, whether you like this the most or the least of the trilogy, but I don't think anybody who liked the previous two will walk out of this movie, like, disappointed. Because at its worst, it lives up to the other two. Some people like me may think it's maybe the best of the three, and some people may think it's the worst of the three, but I think everybody will just be like, all right, cool, that was a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I got what I wanted, and I'm happy for the first time in a while with the MCU.
Yeah, fans of the Guardians series will be happy with this film, for sure. How it will connect to everything else, if it will connect to everything else, I don't really know, but fans of the Guardians at least will be happy.
Right. And I think part of why it did feel standalone and it felt like its own unique film is that it didn't feel like it was trying too hard to be connected. Like, there were obvious connections, like character crossovers and stuff, but like the big overlying plot, the villain of this could have been a Thanos type. Or a Kang type if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But he was very obviously limited to this role, limited to this movie in the way he was portrayed and the scope of what he was trying to do. It was a very limited project. And at first I was kind of like disappointed, like, oh, they could have made this guy so much bigger and cooler. And then I was like, you know, I kind of like when a villain is just localized every once in a while. I don't need him in 5 movies. I don't need him fighting every superhero possible. So I was like, actually, I think I'm fine with that. I kind of forgot I liked James Gunn movies sometimes because I didn't like the Suicide Squad. But I honestly think he works best as a writer when limited to PG-13 movies, or maybe even PG, because I'm a big fan of the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. If you didn't know, he wrote those.
No, I didn't know that.
So I like Guardians of the Galaxy much more than I like either of the Suicide Squad movies.
Yeah,
we only did one.
One was far worse than the other.
But my biggest problem with that was the humor I found too repetitive and boring because it was just the same gore joke over a million times. And he wasn't allowed to fall back on that. And I think that led to a little bit more creativity in the jokes. Some of the jokes were still very obvious Marvel humor joke. I mean, that's shown in the trailer too, the whole thing with the intercom talking in the spacesuit stuff. That scene is so cringy to me. I just don't laugh at all during it. But there's still a lot of really clever jokes in there, a lot of good character-based humor. So if you already like the characters, you already like the actors, you kind of already know, like you said, what we're getting here. It's a Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
And pretty much is everybody, the characters they've been building up to be, they're finally in their seemingly final states as characters. The only one who's reverted is Gamora for, obvious endgame reasons.
Right.
So. Yeah.
So that's what we had to think, spoiler-free. We enjoyed it. Do you want to give it a rating? Before we get into spoilers? I'm thinking a 7.
I'm gonna give it a 7.5.
7.5 is probably fair. I enjoyed it. It sounds like you enjoyed it too.
No, I definitely enjoyed it.
So we definitely recommend it, especially if you like the other ones. I mean, if you didn't like the other ones,
it's definitely one of the top films of, what is this, still Phase 4?
Phase 4, oh, by far, yeah. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's the best or second best, to me at least.
Yeah.
Thor doesn't come close.
No.
I mean, I like Doctor Strange. I know that's kind of a divisive opinion. Not
liked it
everybody
too.
did. But I like this more than that. I like Doctor Strange more for the fact that it was trying new things. But it definitely still was a flawed movie. Yeah, that's what we had to think without spoilers. So we're going to get into spoilers now. So if you don't want anything spoiled, you should click away, go watch it, come back, and we can talk about it then. Thanks, guys. Bye. So,
Bye.
spoilers.
Whoa.
So a lot of people, when the trailer was coming out, the trailer was obviously designed to make you think Rocket was gonna die. So it's like that was the obvious he's not going to die.
So I didn't see. I don't think I saw the trailer. Heard people talk about it. I've seen some of the promotional like posters and such.
Right.
And Rocket was still obviously focused on those too.
Right.
So I really thought there was a potential chance, but that didn't feel very Marvel to kill him off without him being like in a few more movies.
Right.
This isn't Captain America or Robert Downey Jr. here.
I didn't think anybody other than his friends that you see in the trailer, because you see his 3 little friends, Tifa, Floor, and Lila. You see them in the trailer, so I knew immediately, though, well, they're all dying.
Yeah, no, that made sense.
Because it's like, well, if they didn't, well, then where would they be now? So you knew they were gonna die. I didn't think anybody else was gonna die, but the fake out with Peter dying almost got me. I was like, I could see them doing that.
I refused to believe it just because I don't trust death in things anymore.
Right, yeah.
But it would have been something if they actually went through
If they had let it sit a second longer, I would have believed it.
Yeah.
Because I was on the cusp. But then also they did that weird thing where he was like, he got fat for some reason, I guess.
No, I've heard.
It's because like you're puffing up in space or whatever.
I forget the exact reason, but I've heard that can happen to you.
Air in your blood,
I think it's like
or
escape,
something.
being pulled out or something like that.
Probably. I'd never seen that done in movies before, and I don't know that it was done for comedic purposes, but that's kind of how it came across almost, or it was like a mixed message, and I was like, maybe that's the most scientifically accurate that we understand it to be version of you dying in outer space. But some things don't need to be shown. And it's like, everybody when they die also shits themselves. We don't show that in movies. You don't need to know.
Yeah, we leave that to the cartoons to talk about all the time.
So we can just let him freeze over and not puff up. That took me out of the moment. And if that hadn't happened and we just let it sit a little bit more seriously, then I would have believed, I think I would have fallen for it. Because they almost got me. Like I said, they already almost got me, but they should have leaned into it a little bit more. And, for the people that would have fallen for the Rocket thing, they should have leaned into that a little bit longer too, because in both situations, the fake out deaths are so quick. And you're like, you gotta let it sit a little bit more so that the audience can have a chance to feel sad and think it's happening. But if you're just like, oh, they died. No, they didn't.
Like at the beginning of the movie, when it slightly seemed like Rocket could have been dead or something, because he took the shots and they were trying to save him, and if he had died then, I really might have believed it. But after all,
I wouldn't, because it would have been too quick.
But when they did the later one, after all the adventure of coming to him, I'm like, that wouldn't do that.
The one thing that made it close to believable was having, his heavenly visions or whatever. That made it close to believable. But once again, it was too quick.
As soon as he sees because he's seeing his friend in I guess essentially heaven, and he sees a bunch of his friends, and his other friend whose name was never going to come back to Lila. I knew she was going to say, not yet, though.
Yeah. I did like the scene, though. I just wish
it was a good scene. But
both moments should have been dragged out a little bit more. You need to milk it just a little bit more, make the audience believe it for a second.
It's just hard for me to trust it in a Marvel
Oh, absolutely.
film.
It's hard to believe it in any
Robert Downey, but especially these. Robert Downey Jr.'s and Chris Evans came at the end of the
franchise
saga.
Essentially, yeah.
So if this was the end of the saga instead of just the end of the Guardians franchise, I might believe it. But they're gonna keep as many people alive as possible for potential use in other projects, even if they're not really trying to come back.
Like you said, you know the Guardians are ending. So that kind of makes you like, oh, anybody could die. You
Yeah.
know, because the way this movie ends, you know you're not going to see.
But I really
or
didn't
you don't
feel
think
like
you're going to see these characters again.
I really didn't feel like it'd be Nebula.
There was no way they were going to kill Gamora.
No, that's what I'm saying.
again. Yeah,
no chance at all. I didn't think that. Peter was surprising because I really didn't think at all that they would kill him. But then they did
I
the little
could see
fake out.
Chris Pratt being like, I'm done with Marvel. Like, I'm ready to move on.
I could see that, but still, I don't know. I don't think they would have.
But
killed
obviously
him
now
off.
we know he is coming back because they.
Drax felt the most likely. I know they pushed Rocket all the time in the media, but Drax felt the most likely.
Like I said, I didn't think anybody was going to die other than not important characters. Obviously, his friends are important, but like, I didn't think any of the Guardians were going to die coming into it. Just because I was like, well, it's Marvel.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that. They're not brave enough for that. I did really enjoy the whole Rocket story, though. Like, you thought maybe this would get, or at least I thought, maybe it would get boring, the constant going back and forth. But frankly, I enjoyed the whole Rocket origin story and flashbacks and his relationship with the bad guy more than the rest of the plot. Like, I enjoyed that so much. I loved the character development there, especially with him and his friends. And you got to see the villain kind of reveal who he really was a couple times.
Yeah.
Speaking of reveal, when his mask got torn off, that was one of the two moments where I was like, that is beyond what Marvel normally lets go.
No, yeah, showing the gore.
Yeah.
Because like they had some funny moments where people were shot, and especially I was kind of shocked when I forget.
She got shot in the leg?
She got shot in the leg. There was like a little hole there
I was like,
with some
oh.
burn marks,
Yeah.
and everyone was just playing it for a gag. I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh god.
There was moments throughout where I was like, this is not normal MCU. It's not the Suicide Squad.
No,
but this is not normal
It's not
MCU.
R-rated. Like there's no blood or anything.
There's
but, like, wow.
also the scene where they're going down the hallway, just dismantling people in slow motion. And once again, it's not blood, it's goop, like alien goop.
Yeah.
But I was like, there's a lot of it. Like, somebody gets thrown to the wall, and then they throw something that sticks through his leg, so then he hangs upside down by his leg. And I was like, this is Guardians? I wasn't mad about it. I was just a little surprised. I was like, this is definitely a step up in violence as opposed to the other two. And I think it worked for it. I was a little...
No, I definitely think the
shocked.
mauled face at the end from Rocket's attack was
Yeah.
definitely a good touch.
Yeah. I will say and I'm sure he's based off of a comic character that I know nothing about because I'm
Probably.
not a huge comic guy, but he was a Star Trek villain. Everything about this character was a Star Trek villain because his whole plot, his whole like desire to create a whole new thing, be his own god, like it's so Star Trek. Even the stretched face. There's a whole in one of the Star Trek movies. There's a whole group of bad guys that have stretched faces like that. So I was like, this is Star Trek. But oh well, I enjoyed it. He was one of my favorite Marvel villains in a while because he was just so interesting. And so that's why I was like, part of me is disappointed because I was like, I wish he could have done more and I want him back. But I'm like, not every villain needs to come back.
He'd have been great in one of the Marvel TV shows.
Yeah, sure. But that's the kind of villain to me that he could have been a phase villain. Like the lead villain in a whole phase. And obviously he's not going to be because, not that he died, so technically he could come back. I don't think he died. Yeah, they let him live because he's a Guardian and that's what you do.
Except for all the time they announced, kill them all!
We don't kill main characters.
They're standing surrounded by people, and I don't think they're all aliens, but they're like his kind of people, some of them.
Yeah.
And Groot just pulls out
Every
a
gun.
bunch of arms. He's got guns all up inside his body. He pulls out 2 for Peter as well.
Yeah.
And they just start spinning in a circle, killing everybody.
Yeah.
Or
Which
maybe
also-
just maiming them. I don't know. I'm guessing they're killing
dead.
everybody.
They're dead, but because they're like cyborg people, it doesn't count. Same thing with like, this was another moment that I was like, this is not, once again, it's not even Doctor Strange level, but this is above Marvel, is that they get the guy, they drag him through the ground, and then they get a knife and like cut out his like brain because he's got like a computer brain, so they cut out the computer out of his head, and I'm like, once again, no blood, nothing, but you're just like, oh.
I really thought it was just like pull out or something.
Yeah, no.
Or like they scan it for the code. Yeah. No.
And then they've got Bebop and Rocksteady, apparently. And once again, you've got this guy from the Elementals, and he just straight up rips off the head. And it's like, this is beyond the MCU typically. You know, like, once again, it's not super violent because there's green or yellow ooze coming out. It's not blood, but you're like, oh, okay, that's That's different. that is different. And we had fairly young kids sitting next to us. I didn't see how old they were,
I'm
but
pretty sure they were under the age of 13.
so I was constantly wondering. I was like, is this fine for them? And I think most of it probably was. But the face, I don't know about the face. Like, if you're 11 and you see that, are you scared? I don't know.
Probably not, but I could see some people being
10 or under, but I mean, I don't know that they were. So, anyway, yeah, it was definitely a touch above what we're used to getting from Marvel. Once again, not that it's a detriment, it was just different. Kind of like that, though. I like when the MCU actually takes risks, which is why I like I said, Doctor Strange for doing horror elements in a movie. It was fun.
I guess I can talk about the whole Peter and Gamora situation.
Okay.
I kind of expected them to at least be more of a budding relationship.
By the end?
Yeah, than just...
I expected him to go with her to the... not scavengers, whatever they're called.
The
Ravagers.
Ravagers. Yeah.
I thought he was gonna go there because that would be his way of like reuniting with somebody.
I would have if they hadn't done the whole grandfather
thing,
conversation
yeah.
at the beginning.
There's a lot of really dumb writing moments, also really predictable writing moments, like a lot of those really early on smoking guns that you're talking about. Another one was Drax goes, I don't dance, only idiots dance. And so you're like, oh, so he's going to dance at some point, and it's going to be like an important part of the movie, and then lo and behold, in the movie, he's dancing. And you're like, yeah. You basically said you were going to do that.
Who would have expected him to dance?
So, I mean, as much as like we enjoyed it, it is still very obviously an MCU movie.
And Gamora's back to her angry Gamora self, but she starts to warm up to Peter at the end. And I was a little shocked at the end they didn't stay together. But
I was glad though, pleasantly surprised.
It makes sense. It's the more adult thing to do. That they still have to work into it, and there still leaves room to focus on that relationship later. I have not heard anything about how Zoe Saldana feels about potentially reprising the role. I know Drax is done. I think Bradley Cooper's done. I don't think we'll see Groot in a live action show, maybe animated or something.
Right. Why would Vin Diesel care though? He doesn't even have to physically be there.
No, I'm not saying he wouldn't do it. I just don't think they're gonna make.
If they're not gonna do Rocket, they're not gonna do.
I don't think they're gonna do him in quote unquote live action anymore.
Yeah.
If they can just do animated and still have Vin Diesel say I'm Groot 50 different ways.
Speaking of which, he spoke.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it was so underplayed because nobody reacted. And I was like, why?
I heard some people react in the back.
Not people, characters.
Oh yeah.
None of the characters reacted. So I was sitting there going like, did it happen, or are we just hearing what he meant by saying? And so I'm assuming it really is he actually said those words, but none of the characters reacted like he spoke for the first fucking time. What the hell?
See, that's interesting because I hadn't thought about that at the time, but it would make sense because Gamora obviously used to know what Groot was saying back after they became a team. Probably not at the beginning of the first movie. I haven't seen it in a while, but probably later on at the end of the first, and definitely in the second.
As fans and audience members, finally able to understand what
we're
saying?
Finally connected to Groot, maybe because she spent the whole movie warming back up to the team, and at the end of the movie, where the whole movie she wasn't able to understand him anymore, and by the end she was again.
Or
it just feels like. That just happens.
A Marvel movie making, and he said it and nobody reacted.
Hey, but we're talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, we can choose to believe the more creative, better thing and hope it's true. Because I was like, oh my god, this is a big moment. It's kind of like in Planet of the Apes when Caesar talks for the first time. You're like, oh my god, and then nobody reacted. The scene ends and we move on. I'm like, why did nobody react? He just said, I love you guys. And I was like, oh my god, we're family. Like, Vin Diesel on full display.
It's just what they hear all the time.
Family. I feel like we've made this joke already. Oh, other thing, Howard the Duck makes an appearance.
Yeah. So just a little quiet cameo there at the poker table.
Wasn't he was in a post-credit scene in some other
Guardians
movie.
1, I think.
Was it Guardians 1? But so he's actually in this movie though, and he had a line or two. And so I was that's like that, and that is the proper way to do a cameo, because it's not even a cameo at that point. It's like, oh, he's in this universe now. You know he's with these group of people, so now you know we can make a Howard the Duck movie if we want to. Just don't have George Lucas involved and it will be okay. I think that's the proper way to do it. And like I said, there was no fanfare. It wasn't like, you know, Stan Lee and everybody clapping like, oh,
it's Howard the Duck. I don't expect a regular even if they're at the first showing, I don't expect people to know Howard the Duck like that. I recognized it was Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
But I only recognized it's Howard the Duck because after his first cameo, I learned, oh, that's who the hell is Howard the Duck? I learned who he was after that. And so I was like, oh, Howard the Duck.
You're one of the lucky ones who didn't learn who Howard the Duck was because of the awful 90s movie.
Maybe I've seen it, but
movie? I forget when it was.
I mean, maybe I've seen it, but
there are duck titties.
Okay, I don't remember duck titties. that would have stuck with me. I don't care what age I would have seen that at. 4 years old is my first memory.
Duck titties.
It's my rosebud.
That's your moment when you're on the gurney. You've got the oxygen, and then go flash into your mind. Duck titties, and then come back out.
That's worse than what Thanos did to me.
We're losing him. Anyway, I think that's all we have to say. I enjoyed it. It was good. I thought the emotional moments really carried the movie because, like I said, there's a lot less humor, but the emotional moments, the whole Rocket thing is so damn good.
Everybody gets their emotional moment. Rocket gets the most. He gets his whole backstory explained. He gets to see why he's the person he is now and how he's going forward, and he gets some hope for the future.
Right. He gets his own redemption, saving all of the lesser life forms. I love that bit where he goes in and he says, they're like, all right, get the higher life forms, and then he's like, all right, and he goes and gets the lesser ones. And that was beautiful. I love that.
And Peter gets his moment going home to see his grandfather he hasn't seen since he was 8 years old. Gamora's found her new family, and if they ever have a series with the two of them again, maybe they'll get back together in that, but who knows.
But the point is, for her, she has her family.
True.
Like the whole thing, the whole reason, like you see this pull back and forth between her and Quill, and it's like, come on, be like, you want a family, join the family. And then you see she has one and she's okay, you know? And so I love that moment because it's a very emotionally mature moment to be like, she can have a life outside of you. And that's fine. Like, that's good, even. So I really did enjoy how maturely they handled that. I really did. It's surprising for a Marvel movie.
Drax got his moments. He's gonna be with Nebula, leading the little children because his family was killed, but he's always been a good father at heart.
Right. Apparently he can speak whatever gibberish they speak.
Jub jub.
Jub jub. They know 3 words and 2 of them are jub.
And that means friend.
Friend?
I guess so.
I guess. Anyway, yeah, I enjoyed it. Check it out. If you like the other 2, you'll definitely like this one too.
Yeah.
Probably not going to change any minds, but it is the most emotionally mature of the 3, which definitely won me over, and it made it my favorite of the 3. May not be yours, but it definitely was at least as good as the other 2. So, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like, comment, and share. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Alrighty then.